this starting now. Okay, so last week we went through syllabus, we went through expectations, we went through a lot of things about our experience. We're trying to do different things this go around that we've done in the past. So making it more formalized will help with that. Also, it's going to lead to some things in the future as we continue to build relationship with our different branches across campus, from academic groups to student groups. So we want to make it more formalized over time. So if anybody has any questions about what that looks like and your involvement in it, always hit me up about that. So I mentioned last week the fact that you belong. We want to create a group that people want to be a part of. We want to create an internship program that is a farm system, for lack of better terms. So we develop our own. We let them cultivate and learn in areas that they're interested in. Some may leave, some may come back, some may never leave our department, but we don't want to hire people external when we have great people here, especially young people. So you belong. You just got to make sure you find your way and what you want to do. In the Teams account, I shared a staff tracker, and I want to just kind of take a second to show you how I use that. So the link I sent is basically just a Microsoft form, okay, and it'll show up right on your phone. And basically what I'll do is any interaction I have with the team, whether it be a meeting, whether it be a conversation, project work. So last night I was on the computer doing some project work. As soon as I was done with that, I input the project into my tracker. So I have everybody's name on this call in the tracker. I'm just double checking here. Yes, I should have everybody's last name. So basically what I'll do, and what we can do after this call, I would encourage you to do this, but I keep it right on my home screen on my phone. And I will just basically find my name and I just fill out the survey. And it's basically just keeping an audit of what we're doing, where we're spending our time. From an organizational standpoint, I learned this from it was a data podcast, essentially, on how you use information and data to make and improve decisions for a business. So the story that they gave was, let's say we all own a taxi cab company and we're in State College and we have 10, 15 taxis, whatever it may be, and we're spreading them all across the town. But we want to collect user data to identify where exactly we want to put all of our taxis. So for example, if it's game day in the fall, we know we need to put all of our taxis around the stadium and downtown versus putting them in Bellefonte in the surrounding areas. So user data like this allows us to make better decisions over time. So I will use this from an administrative standpoint to make sure we're working with the right teams, making sure we're putting the adequate amount of resources in certain areas. And we actually have tailored this to give to our people that are over top of us to help enhance what we do. So anything you do, it doesn't matter if it's tracking a practice, it doesn't matter if it's studying, doing project work for this group here, just input it into your tracker there. If you have any problems with that, definitely let me know there as well. All right, last thing. I noticed everybody had been putting some content into Microsoft Teams. Let's keep building that. So each week, throw something on there. What are you reading? What are you coming across on social media? What's really sparking your interest? So let's keep doing that. And then the next thing, and I probably will sound like a teacher here, but engage with other people too. So it's not just about me sharing, it's about me interacting with things that are getting put up there. So if Olivia or Dan put something that I like, I may ask them a question about it, or I may comment, or I may share something in addition to that. So let's make it just kind of a living, breathing, sharing area. So, all right, before we get started here, does anybody have anything, any questions, any thoughts that we need to talk about? All right, right on. All right, I'm going to share this. For some reason, my PowerPoint was not being too friendly with me while I was trying to be on Zoom here. So I'm just going to share the PDF. And you're going to notice when I teach and do different things, I'm not going to just read right through. I'm just going to kind of jam through. I'll share this slide deck with everybody here so they have it. But this is, to me, really, really foundational to what we do. It is very coach centric today, but I want you to just quickly substitute staff, performance staff, every time you see the word coach, every time you see this kind of lane, because it is very all encompassing, and it lays the foundation for what we're going to try to do from a high performance perspective. All right. So I can't see everybody when I'm sharing here. So if somebody has a question or wants to stop, just unmute, very informal, and we'll roll from there. Okay. All right. So what we're going to talk about today is essentially quality coaching or quality staff practicing, if you will. Okay. So the USOC and the Paralympic Committee, they put out a piece in 2020 called the Quality Coaching Framework. And essentially what that did was put together some ideas around what is positive coaching, what is organization of athlete development in a lot of different areas. A supplement to that, which is really foundational, you don't really need this text. I shared the Quality Coaching Framework last night on Teams, but another great text is the Wade Gilbert book. And it just talks about developing a year-wide plan for how we do different things in terms of planning, in terms of auditing our practices as coaches and staff members. It's a really good read. But first section here, and we'll just kind of roll through there, just going to look at what quality coaching is. I want to introduce an idea called TPACK Framework. It's just how kids learn, how athletes can learn, and how we as staff can shape what we do to make it very holistic. And then we want to talk about our different areas of our personal development. So when we think about quality coaching or quality staffing, I don't really know what to say there, quality staff being, we think about a couple different areas. One is our knowledge. Okay. That's like our ammunition. So what we use as staff members to help reinforce what we're doing. We think about athlete outcomes. Okay. So it doesn't matter what I know if I can't impact athlete outcomes. And then you're going to see this, especially as we get deep in some of our data conversations, is context is everything. Information, fancy drills, fancy technology without context is essentially nothing. So we need to think about this. And the common trend you'll see in a lot of this work in this area of athlete development is it's all holistic. So when we think about holistic development, when we think about a comprehensive system for growing athletes, we can think about the TPACK framework. So this came from Mishra and Kohler back in 2007. And basically what it was is it was looking at sport from a pedagogical standpoint and how teachers can teach sport education, and then how, especially like physical education teachers, but you can take it directly to coaching. So basically, it's really easy to think about building content knowledge. Okay, so if I want to teach something, I can easily talk about the X's and O's. If I'm talking physics, I can talk about levers, I can talk about mechanisms, I can talk about different things like that. If I'm discussing a math concept, I can do the same thing. Okay, content knowledge is the X's and O's. Now, pedagogical knowledge, that's how I'm delivering it. Okay, so if I'm a staff member that's talking to a team after practice and the coach says, hey, you got 2 minutes, what is your pedagogical approach, your teaching approach to deliver a punch? Are you storytelling? Are you giving an example? Are you showing a prop? That pedagogical knowledge of how to reach athletes, how to reach kids, students, that is your delivery mechanism. Okay, so now I got content knowledge, what I'm talking about. I got pedagogical knowledge, the delivery of how I'm talking about it. Okay, now the neat thing, especially within our lane, and why I think this is so powerful, is the technological knowledge. We have so many resources at our fingertips. One of my favorite is a simple iPad and using OneNote or a note-taking app. It just allows you to scale what you're doing. Microsoft Teams, it allows you to scale things faster. It allows you to build what I'm about to drop here in a second, a community of learners. Okay, so now as us as staff members that work in sport, us as coaches that work in sport, if we put this all together and we develop content knowledge, our ammo, our pedagogical knowledge, the delivery mechanism, and then the technological knowledge, we can really start to influence athlete outcomes. So as you're going through your journey and developing as a staff member, I would just keep encouraging you, don't fall prey to just stay here. Don't fall prey to just jam it out in this area. Working on putting it all together so that you can provide rich context for everything that you're doing. Okay. I'm not really going to spend too much time here. I provided some of this. One thing I will kind of highlight here is Jean Coté here is a fantastic author in this space. So he talks about athlete development, especially from a long-term perspective, but all of Jean Coté's work is fantastic. But basically, in terms of developing sport knowledge, there's a couple different things that we can do. You could have been an athlete. You know, a lot of people played in sport in college. A lot of people played in high school. A lot of people play at the master's level later in life. We can continue gaining knowledge of sport as an athlete. We can coach. We can be a staff member, a support staff member. And then finally, we can engage in continual practice over time. And I would encourage everybody, quite frankly, to find your area and try to build in all different areas here. Okay, I'm not going to roll through here. I do want to spend time here. I alluded to the community. So a lot of my work when I was in grad school dealt with developing coaching communities. Okay, so using coaching communities to continue to learn, continue to grow, and to scale knowledge over time. So when you see our Microsoft Teams, that's a way scaled approach to some of the things we learned with communities of practice. But essentially what a community of practice is a group of people that have shared interest, that have a shared direction, and some type of bonding substance, whether it be just, hey, we're all Penn Staters, we're all want to impact athletes, maybe we're just all like the color blue, I don't know, but something that's bonding us together. So a community of practice for us is Microsoft Teams. Anything that we learn, we can rapidly scale to each other, but we want to be able to do that so that we can all help our coaching knowledge. All right, that's done with section. I'm going super fast. Anybody have any questions at that point? All right, right on. So I'll say too, in the syllabus, and I'll send this out today. I realized I just didn't send that out last week. There is a video, a more in-depth video of each one of these sections of me just talking last summer. So if you want more about a specific area here, it's all on the video series. Okay, so now when we think about quality coaching, it starts with us. It starts with the coach. It starts with the staff member. Okay, it doesn't matter if I'm a dietitian, if I'm an athletic director, if I'm a head coach. It doesn't matter what my role. It's going to start with me because I have to be able to develop and I have to be able to lead. Now, it starts with me, but it all is centered around the athlete. And that's why what we want to think of as an athlete-centered environment is so vital for us. Okay, so when we think about section 2, we want to understand that an athlete-centered environment works toward developing a game understanding. Okay, so everybody is trying to better understand the sport. They want to understand how they fit within the sport. An athlete-centered environment allows and promotes questioning. You know, if you talk to older people, maybe a generation or two older than us, a lot of times it'll be, you may hear the comment that's, you know, kids these days always want to know why. That's not necessarily a bad thing. The questioning empowers the athlete to know more about the sport and the game. Okay, so we want to improve and promote questioning. Now, that doesn't mean we want to promote, you know, trying to second guess or try to get to the bottom or to coerce a decision in a certain way. That's not what I'm saying. I just mean an athlete-centered environment promotes a holistic understanding from everybody, staff and athletes. Okay, this is an area I'm going to get into in just a second, but we're at a kind of crossroads where we are, and at Penn State, we are still developmental in that many of our athletes have a ton of room to grow and to mature on the field, off the field. However, it is extremely high stakes. So there's a fine line between development and then winning. Okay. So we think about how we as educators, as coaches, as staff members fit within this athlete-centered environment. We always just can be benefited by thinking of ourselves as teachers. So my man here, Tom Manning, he's a tight ends coach for the Indianapolis Colts now. He always said something, and it was always something to the effect of coaching is teaching and teaching is inspiring others to learn. So you can take that, you can break it down into a lot of different areas. So if I'm a technical tactical coach, I can certainly teach scheme to allow the athlete to learn. If I'm a sports scientist and I'm working on maybe a physiological test with an athlete in the lab, I can start to break that down to make sure the athlete understands it to impact a behavior downstream. But essentially coaching, and remember, we substitute coaching for staffing. Okay. Anytime I'm practicing around an athlete, I'm a teacher. So I need to have the ability to provide rich context and to make sure that learning is occurring. This is kind of the evolution of where we are in sport. Many of us on this meeting here, we think about old school authoritarian type coaches may exist on this side, whereas a truly athlete-centered coach is kind of over on here. There's some gray to this, maybe at different times of the year, maybe at different times of an athlete's career, maybe even within a individual practice, that a coaching or staff involvement can kind of teeter on both sides of this. But basically, we have a lot of different areas that we can look at here. So for us, I would just encourage everybody to think, what is the situation that you're in? What is your role? And then how do you find the happy medium on where you need to be? It's almost being able to change and to be like water. So if I'm leading early on in a semester and I know I need to set the tone, maybe I'm a little bit more to the left side. Now, that doesn't mean I'm just preaching, telling, yelling. It just means that I need to be pretty rigid. As we develop athletes, or maybe I have a more veteran roster, maybe I move a little bit more to the right. We can do this as staff members as well. I'm not going to go through this, but this is a really neat thing. This comes from the teaching world, but it's just Mostyn's spectrum of teaching styles. So what you typically have is younger students, younger athletes get a ton out of maybe a little higher on the spectrum. But as they mature, as they grow, as they become self-aware and their decision-making improves, they benefit from being a little bit lower down this. And quite frankly, that's the way education is. You think about when you enter kindergarten, or just at the beginning of your sporting career, a lot of it is very structured, very organized. It's very repetitive over time. That's in this area. But then as you reach, let's just say even, so John Kelly, you're working on your PhD. How much do they tell you to do? Or is it all self-taught? It's
Do you mean like how much does the department tell me to teach the kids?
No, I'm saying for your journey and your PhD.
Oh,
how many times have you ever been like, man, I just wish there was a handbook for how to do this?
Pretty much every single day. Every single day I'm kind of on my own figuring out what to do.
Yeah, exactly. Because you've reached this point here of self-teaching, self-discovery. Now, as the learner, as the athlete, that can be intimidating. I remember it was super intimidating for me, because you're wondering, am I doing this right? Am I doing this? Should I be doing this? I wish there was a guidebook, but that self-teaching, that self-discovery allows you to learn so much more. Okay, I'm just going to roll down through some of this. Great content here if you want to come back to this on the video. All right, we'll pause there. Does anybody have any questions, any thoughts? I know this is kind of pretty, maybe philosophical in terms of sport education, but any questions, thoughts, needs? All right, we're going to keep rolling. All right, so when we think about ourselves developing as a coach, starting with us and our development, then keeping the athlete at the center of everything that we do, The next phase would be to think about your sporting organization, whether you're running a national governing body for USA Ski and Snowboard, USA Bobsled, USA Track and Field, baseball, you insert NGB, or you're running a youth development program at a local recreation center. Whatever the situation it is, you can benefit by thinking about the game model, long-term athlete development, this idea of holistic development, which I keep bringing up, and then planning. So here's how we bring this together. So the game model. So the game model, it's a heavy soccer term. And basically what the game model is, it's your way of play. A lot of times it's driven, excuse me, by the head coach or the person that's in charge. But basically your game model is like the Penn State way. This is how we play. This is our approach. This is our sayings, almost like a community of practice approach, which, hey, this is how we operate in this. When we experience this situation, this is how we work. This is our offense, defensive scheme, and how we create space. This is how we're going to shoot the ball down the field and then work here. The benefit of everybody understanding the game model of what the organization wants is that everybody can rally behind that game model. So if I know, let's say we're coaching bowling, okay? If I'm a bowling team and the head coach of the bowling team has a specific style, and then I'm the strength and conditioning coach, I know that I need to take my training to make sure that they're physically prepared from a foundational standpoint, but I need to take the upper limits of my training to match the scheme and the style of the head coach, because that fits the game model. It allows them to be successful. Okay, take that same scenario. We're bowling. The coach lays down the game model, and I'm a sports scientist. I know that I need to tailor much of what I'm doing. Again, there's foundational things that I need to do just from a health, foundational physical development standpoint. But the majority of my work needs to align with the head coach's mission, the NGB's mission, whoever sets the game model. That allows every vertical, and when I say a vertical, every department, tactical, physical, mental, nutrition, sports science, everybody to be in parallel, to be in alignment with the overall mission of the organization. Okay, so the game model is extremely powerful. Okay, so now we have the game model. Esteban Balye here, fantastic author here, brings up the idea of long-term athlete development. Okay, so once we have the game model, we know where we're at. We need to think about where on the spectrum of developmental to elite are our athletes. They all could be different at different times of their career. Okay, they could be very different in terms of the year. Quite honestly, nowadays in sport, you may have a developmental athlete who you think that they're not going to play this year because there's people ahead of them, and because of specific injuries during the year, you may have a developmental athlete that has to take reps with the first team because of injury. So they could, even within one season, go from a developmental standpoint to have to provide a lot of minutes on the field. Okay, so the biggest thing with LTAD, long-term athlete development, is just understanding, what are you looking for? Are you looking for outcomes? Are we trying to get on the podium with an athlete? Or are you looking for processes? It's very different. It allows you to, if you're looking for outcomes, you may have to be a little bit more risky in aligning toward the game model. You may have to take, think about, I forget who said this, but like if you have an alpine skier, these guys and ladies are going to the max downhill. There's no room for checking up or slowing down at all. If you're going to reach the podium, it's all or nothing, and they're going to the limit. When you do that, performance goes through the roof because you're not slowing down. But what you take on is an absorbent amount of risk. So thinking about outcomes, if that's what you need, you would probably take on a little bit more risk, as opposed to if it's just a developmental training session, you probably wouldn't speed down the hill as fast. You would be teaching fundamentals a little bit more. You'd be teaching about the course. So when we think about LTAD, it's all about, where are you on the spectrum? Are you trying to create outcomes? Is it appropriate to and ethical to create outcomes with certain types of groups that you're working with? Or do you need to be focusing more on processes and development? I'm not going to go through this, but I would encourage you to, just along your journey as you create your library, if you come across LTAD materials, save it off. It's fantastic. There's neat things from a chronological and training age standpoint from athletes on how they develop over time and what they should be working on. It's really, really neat. And I'm just going to skip over some of this, but I would encourage everybody to check this out, and I can share some of this on Teams. Going back to holistic development, and this I mentioned last week, I want everybody to be able to talk about this pyramid. This is our Penn State way. This is what we think of when we want to work with athletes. The first is health and wellness. Okay, we start there because it's all about habits. It's about lifestyle. It's about decisions. The wider, the thicker this base is, the more I can put on top. The middle four are trainable aspects. And I already talked about it last week, so I'm not going to go in depth, but I can spend time training all these. And then high performance, and be able to tell this. So if a coach asks what you're trying to do as a high performance intern, we're trying to drive high performance. It's consistent execution of whatever role we're doing. So for an athlete, if I'm a wing, if I'm a receiver, if I'm a second baseman, whatever it is, I'm trying to do my job at a high level every single time. Once I know what that is, I can work backwards and train these different aspects. Okay. Planning and evaluation. We have another conversation about this downstream at another date, but planning is everything. And this is how all of our data that we're going to collect later on comes back into play. So we have a plan, we lay it out. We typically like to start long-term and work backwards. Okay. So when I say long-term, this is like an annual plan. This is specific to like football. Just, we're not giving away anything here. It's just calendar dates. Okay. But this was like last year. It's laying out the calendar 52 weeks at a time to be able to see different blocks of time that exist. Okay, so that's high level, that's thinking broad. Then the next level down would be taking it to a block plan. Okay, so now I know I have 6 to 8 weeks in a winter training block. I start to make it more granular, and I put my training block this way, and I start to put what I'm trying to accomplish here. Okay. When I have a group, just like we've talked about with our community practice here, and everybody in the group, let's just say on Microsoft Teams, has a copy of this plan. Now, I will say not everybody should have the right to adjust the plan. I'm simply saying read the plan. When everybody has the plan here, we can make decisions much easier. It also allows people to see what's coming so that they can make plans over time. Okay. So this section real quick, and again, I kind of talked about it a second ago. I'm going high level here. We have videos detailing each one of these sections in depth. But this third section, when we're just thinking about quality coaching, quality sport frameworks, the game model, it's all about the head coaches, the organizations, or the NGB, national governing bodies, approach toward that sport. Connections to LTAD, just seeing things in a big picture, holistic approach, using our pyramid, using everything there, and then basically just tying it together with planning and evaluation. All right, any questions, thoughts before our last section here? All right, so this one is, I think, one of the most important ones we'll talk about here, and it draws a lot from the world of investing. But principles are simply just things that I can hang my hat on no matter what. In our world, in high performance, so sport technology, data around information, the latest and greatest recovery tools and training methodologies, they're always going to come our way. If we're not careful, we can get enamored with the newest and next greatest thing that comes down to our email box from a vendor. If we hang our hat on principles, it doesn't matter if I'm a sport coach or if I'm a support staff member in the athletic training room, the weight room, or the sports science lab. If I hang my hat on principles, it's going to be a decision-making framework for me as I go down the line. Okay. So principles. when we think about principles in sport, for us, it could be as simple as looking at biological things that we learn in school, how things interact, how the different energy systems in the body work together, how from a biomechanical standpoint, how our body moves in space, how we create force. So the lady on the right is Joe Clubb. Okay, so she used to be a sports scientist with Chelsea in the Premier League. She was with the Buffalo Bills, the Buffalo Sabres. She's now an independent consultant in high performance. And one of the things that she talks about is many a times sports science gets put on the top pedestal. Okay, it's like we train, we learn how to coach, and then we put sports science on this, like it's the top. Her argument is that sports science, these foundational principles, whether it's biology, whether it's physiology, whether it's biomechanics, these foundational principles for us too, I threw the pyramid in here just because this is our foundational principles. She argues that sports science is not the top, but the bottom, because it provides the foundational principles to what we're trying to do on the field. Okay. So just thinking about principles, everything that we need to learn can be foundational for later on. This is where I was talking about the investment world. So a couple extra great resources here. Again, you don't have to buy anything. Much of what these guys have is free online. But Ray Dalio, investor, and then Shane Parrish runs a blog called Farnham Street Blog. And what they do is talk about principles. In fact, Ray Dalio's book is called Principles. But essentially what these guys talk about from an investing standpoint is it's really easy to fall prey to, I'm just going to invest in this new stock. I'm going to invest in this. I'm going to listen to this advice. But what they work on is creating mental models to help make decisions, to help keep us consistent over time. We can take all of this information directly to sport. So when we in the sports science lab and we're looking at a ton of different information, as we're helping coaches design practice plans, or as we're working on a developmental plan for an athlete, if we hang our hat on these foundational principles that Joe Clubb talked about, that these guys allude to in different fields, it can really help us over time. So examples in sport, and this is kind of wrapping us up here a little bit. Okay, so examples of principles in sport from an exercise science perspective. Adaptation. For me, I think adaptation may be the most important principle that we can ever think about in our lane, because essentially with this one comment I'm about to say, it can help so many decisions. What adaptation are you chasing? Okay, so if I'm a coach, if I'm a track coach, if I'm a football coach, if I'm a soccer coach, or if I'm in the athletic training room working on rehab, what adaptation are you chasing when you give a prescription of movement? Okay, so if I am sprinting athletes, what adaptation am I chasing? Okay, then work backwards. If the adaptation that you're trying to get to is not matching what the exercise is actually doing, it's violating that principle. So adaptation is huge. Adaptation is essentially just adjustments over time after a living body is put under a specific direction of training. Okay, so typically specific adaptation of imposed demands, the SAID principle tells us that if an organism is roughly healthy over time and you put it under stress over time, it's going to either adapt or it's going to maladapt and die. Okay, so as coaches, we need to think about what adaptation are we trying to chase in anything that we do. Okay, another principle within performance, exercise science, is just the order of exercise, and it goes back to adaptation. So if I'm training in the weight room and I'm building out a training card, or even if I'm on the field, the order in which I put my drills or exercises matter. Okay? Typically, we think of things going fast to slow, complex to less complex, things like that, because it impacts things downstream a little bit less. So let's just take, if I was going to do a snatch, a squat, and then some assistance work way downstream, it would be beneficial for me to put the snatch at the beginning because it's very fast and technical and it's power oriented. Okay. I'm not going to be susceptible to the fatigue that comes around later in the exercise, so I can still be fast over time. Okay. If I'm on the field and I want to get my athletes open field running, it would be beneficial for me to put my speed work early in the session before they're tired so they can actually hit top end speeds. So order of exercise would be a principle for us as high performance staff members. Work to rest ratios, again, going back to adaptation. What adaptation are we chasing? If I'm working speed and I don't have adequate rest, there's no way that I'm going to be able to repeat sprints over and over and over and over. So that's where work to rest ratios come into hand. But it also ties back to adaptation. What adaptation am I chasing? Okay, I know what that is. What work to rest ratio parallels that adaptation? And then the stress response theory, it kind of what I mentioned with the SAID principle, but just stress response, how us as higher order organisms that think and reason, we can actually undergo stress that's not physical. So it's really easy to think about, hey, I had a really light training session today. Our athletes should be really, really good to go. But if it's during midterms and they have a ton of academic strain, or it's at the beginning of a new stress semester and they're meeting all these new people and they have a lot of social stress, maybe they're not as fresh as we think about. So stress response theory is just thinking holistically and pulling things together. Okay, tactical rules, tactical principles. These things we could think about on the field. If I'm a sport coach, if I'm a sports scientist that works specifically with the coaching side to design practice, I need to think about coverage rules. I can think about if this, then that. These things kind of work together. So if I know more about the sport, think about what we were talking about in the earlier sections. If I know more about the sport, it provides context to some of the things that I'm talking about. But basic principles, the way we teach and design, can help us with on-field work too. So if I'm teaching a group of athletes a specific coverage, it's beneficial to tie things together and to create rules of if this, then that. Tie things together, create synergies so that athletes understand them. Understanding positional assignments and teaching the whole, then a specific assignment of an individual athlete, and then putting it all back together and how it fits to the team. Principles, how we're teaching things within our group. And then things like scramble rules. This was very specific to like football, but it goes back to if this, then that. In my sport, if I'm teaching principles to our athletes, they know automatically what should happen. So if a quarterback was running and a receiver downfield knows to go the opposite way that he was originally going to, this is a principle that we could teach so that when we get in the game or a practice setting, when the stakes are high, they don't have to think about it too much because it's already embedded, because it's a principle. So for high performance, and this is really important for us, it's important for everybody on this call who's going to be leading a group like this one day, okay? In our world, complexity can be dangerous. Fancy things can be dangerous because they're not simple. Sometimes they're not scalable. They're not sustainable. It's really easy too in our lane to say, hey, I'm going to solve. So my dissertation advisor always talked to me about, don't build the brick wall day one, just lay the first brick. For us in our area here, it's really easy not for us to think about the low hanging fruit, the small changes that we can make. We're going to try to make the whole change today. From a high performance perspective, especially as you're managing sport from all these different areas, we need to think about these principles. We want to be simple. We want to be sustainable and scalable. Now, the uncomfortable thing is you're going to be challenged. Why aren't we doing blood lactate testing on the field with athletes? Why aren't we doing this new thing that I saw on Twitter? We have to have the ability to be slow, to hang our hat back on our principles and make sure that things are sustainable over time, okay? Find the low-hanging fruit. Where are the areas in your team, in your organization that you can make small changes that will then over time scale to big changes? I'm going to keep coming back to this. Please, please, please be able to talk about this pyramid, because this is the foundational. This is a principle for us. Okay. All right. So I'll drop a lot of this content into here, but into Teams, so people have this, but it's all on what we have on YouTube. But the biggest thing for me today, and this is probably going to be the last one where I talk really high level sport organization philosophy around sport. But when we think about quality coaching or quality sport, it's all about how we are developing and creating a product for our athletes. It's about putting the athletes at the center of everything. And it's not just always just giving them a say. There are times when they should not have a say, especially in developmental periods of their career or year. But it's about allowing them to have a say in the way they're treated. A patient-centered outcomes in healthcare. The patient deserves a say in how their body is treated in treatment. Our athletes are the same exact way. Okay. Keep on coming down through here. And then principles. When we think about principles, it is the decision-making framework for what we're going to be doing. So I would encourage you in your area, and we're all different. We want this group to be eclectic because we can help find different avenues to solve problems and to make decisions. But in your specific area, what are your principles? And then how can that help make decisions for you? That is it. All right. Anybody have thoughts or questions, responses from what we talked about today?
I was just going to add, there were some things we talked about down in the principles section of today about even like motor learning, transfer of training, that kind of stuff. There was a really good lecture that I attended at the NSCA conference this past week that was about transfer of training. I can share some resources on that. It was from Bill Sands, who has done plenty of amazing work in applied sports science for years and years and years. So I'll share some of that in the Teams chat, but there was some really good stuff in there. So
that's awesome. Great, Ed. I would agree. All right. So what we'll plan on doing next week, we're going to talk a little bit more about high performance. So we're shifting gears. Last week, we were very administrative. This week, it was very foundational in sport. Next week, we're going to be talking high performance. So bringing the different branches together. I'll talk a little bit about the history of where we came from in high performance, but then we're going to start to branch out into a lot of different areas. Next week, we will also introduce, we're not going to talk about it a lot together, but we'll introduce Smartabase. Smartabase is our data management software that we'll use for all of our data across Penn State Athletics and our electronic medical records, so all of our health data for our athletes. And there's a foundations course on their website, and it's free. So if anybody wants to go check that out, you basically go to smartabase.com. Top right-hand corner, there's a tab called Academy. You can make a free account and you can start working through that. It'll give you a little feel. But if you're working with a team here coming up this fall, it'll be beneficial for you to just have a basic understanding of how that data gets put in there. But we'll talk about that. In the meantime, keep putting information in. If you will, put your staff tracker information in. So even with this, just put the first one in today. If you post something educationally on our channel, go ahead and put that in today. And then many of you guys have sent your schedule to me. Thank you for that. I will start working with Olivia and with Dan, putting people into different responsibilities, and we'll let everybody know there. But this is a cool thing for us because we get a head start on the fall by just spending a little bit of time with one another in the summer. If anybody needs anything, let us know. And if nothing, we'll be back next Tuesday. Sound okay? Awesome. Sounds great. Well, I appreciate everybody's time, and I'll post the video once it's all processed.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Coach, see ya.
Thank you, Nelly. Thank you.